I was trying to focus, really, I was. Staring at the scattered invoices on my desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, pretending the hum of the fluorescent lights was enough to keep me grounded. But then she walked in, without warning, without a knock, just the soft click of the office door, and everything I was thinking immediately became irrelevant. She carried herself like she owned the quiet corners of this place, even though she technically didn't. Mid-40s, hair streaked with the kind of gray that made her look both stern and impossibly alive, and eyes that noticed everything but revealed nothing. She had a folder in her hand, but the way she leaned against the edge of the desk, just slightly, not too close, not too far, felt deliberate. Calculated. "Did you get the Henderson file yet?" she asked, voice calm, like she wasn't aware of the sudden shift in the air. I swallowed, pretending to look at the papers, but the moment stretched out anyway. Her gaze lingered on mine for a beat longer than necessary. A heartbeat too long. There was this electricity there, subtle and confusing, and I could feel it prickling up my spine. I wanted to look away but didn't. She moved closer to set the folder down, and the corner of it brushed against my arm. A small contact, meaningless in most offices, but in that moment it felt like the room had shrunk. Papers teetered precariously on the edge of the desk. She noticed and half-laughed, not at me, not at the mess, just a light, genuine sound that seemed to belong to some other version of this office, one I'd never been allowed to enter before. "Careful," she said softly, adjusting a stack so it wouldn't topple, her fingers brushing mine by accident, or maybe not. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She just stayed. I tried to speak, but my words caught somewhere between the desk and my chest. What do you even say in moments like this? And then, without thinking, without planning, I felt myself reaching for her hand just as she leaned back to straighten a pile of forms. Papers went flying, flurrying like birds startled from a branch, and suddenly the office was chaos. And then, before I knew what was happening, I pulled her onto the edge of the desk, her hair brushing my arm, her eyes wide for a heartbeat before she blinked and settled into this tense, charged silence. I had no words. Nothing I could say would explain the way my chest felt, the way my mind went blank and then screamed all at once. So I let my mouth do what my words couldn't. She didn't push me away. She didn't move closer either. Just held that space, that weight, that quiet understanding that had nothing to do with policy or deadlines. My pulse was loud in my ears. The rest of the office ceased to exist, save for her presence, steady and impossible, and that small, unspoken acknowledgement that something had shifted. And when she finally stepped back, adjusting her jacket, straightening the papers I'd scattered, she gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. One of those smiles that seems casual but leaves marks you can't wipe away. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head. Like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. I should have left after she gathered the papers. I really should have. But something in the way she lingered near the desk made it impossible to move. It wasn't just the mess I'd caused, it was her, standing there like she was both challenge and sanctuary, and me, well, me, caught somewhere in between. She was going through some documents that weren't technically mine to see, confidential stuff, and I could feel the weight of it all pressing down like gravity. And yet, I couldn't look away. The crease in her brow when she read a line, the way she bit the inside of her lip almost unconsciously, those little cracks in her composure made her feel human. Vulnerable. For a moment, she wasn't the untouchable, confident woman everyone in the office admired. She was just her, and that scared me more than I cared to admit. I kept my hands busy, pretending to sort through the papers, but my eyes kept drifting. Her wrist brushed against the edge of the folder, and I caught the faint tremble that betrayed her calm tone. She cleared her throat, and I wondered if she knew I'd noticed. Did she know I'd noticed how tense her shoulders were? How a shadow of exhaustion lingered behind her eyes? She looked younger when she was off guard, human, and not some flawless force of competence. I shouldn't feel this pull. She was mid-40s, yes, and yes, she was my superior here, professionally untouchable. But the way her fingers lingered on the papers a second too long, the way she glanced at me like she wanted to ask something but held herself back, it made my chest tighten. I was supposed to be helping her, organizing files, keeping my head down, but suddenly I felt like I was balancing on a knife's edge, aware of every micro-movement between us. "You're staying late tonight?" she asked softly, and the sound of her voice felt like it had been dipped in something warm and dangerous. I froze, unsure if I should answer, unsure if my heart was giving me permission I didn't deserve. Yeah. Just catching up." My voice sounded flat to my own ears, like I'd betrayed my own nerves. Her hand brushed mine, briefly, accidentally. Maybe not. I didn't pull away. She didn't either. There was a weight in that touch, a question neither of us spoke. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged somewhere in my throat, clumsy and inadequate. Instead, I just nodded, pretending to rearrange the papers, but I couldn't stop noticing the curve of her shoulder under the soft fabric of her blouse, the way her eyes softened when she realized I was watching. "Stay a little longer," she said, almost a whisper. My stomach dropped, and the air between us felt heavier, charged. She was asking for more than company. More than help. And somehow, I wasn't sure I could resist the thought of giving it. I caught myself imagining what it would be like if I crossed that line, if I said what I shouldn't, moved where I wasn't supposed to. The thought terrified me, and thrilled me, at the same time. Her gaze lingered a moment longer, and I realized I couldn't leave, not yet. Something in me had already anchored itself to her presence, and I was beginning to understand that this quiet tension wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. The office was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner, the occasional shuffle of papers, and the faint tick of the wall clock. I was stacking invoices, pretending to focus, but every time I glanced at her, my chest tightened. She leaned back in her chair, stretching slightly, and I noticed the subtle way her blouse shifted, revealing a line of skin I shouldn't have allowed myself to see. "I didn't realize how late it had gotten," she said, her voice softer than before, almost like she was confessing something private to the empty room. Her eyes met mine for a beat longer than necessary. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but my words felt heavy, untrustworthy, and I swallowed them instead. Then she laughed, a small, brittle laugh, and it sounded too fragile to be casual. "I'm tired," she admitted. Just like that, a wall crumbled. There was a vulnerability there, and it drew me in like a magnet. My hand itched to reach for her, to steady her, to do something that would erase the tension I felt clawing at my chest. Instead, I let my fingers brush hers as I handed her a folder. It was accidental, a quick, "here you go," gesture, but the contact lingered a fraction too long. She didn't pull away. Her hand twitched slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if she knew the charge between us but wasn't ready, or willing, to acknowledge it. I tried to pull back internally. "Focus. Keep it professional." "Don't," but my brain refused. Every glance, every exhale, every subtle motion was loaded with things neither of us said aloud. I could feel my own heartbeat echoing in my ears, loud enough that I was sure she could hear it, too. Then, the phone rang. It was harsh, intrusive, shattering the fragile bubble we'd created. I jumped slightly, fumbling to answer it, grateful for the distraction. She laughed softly again at my clumsiness, and that sound, it made me want to throw the phone across the room and forget about everything but her. "Everything okay?" she asked, leaning slightly closer, her shoulder brushing mine this time. "Accidental?" "I didn't think so." Her gaze caught mine, unflinching, and I felt a wave of guilt and desire crash over me simultaneously. She was tired, and yet here she was, still holding my attention hostage. I wanted to tell her something I wasn't supposed to say. Something reckless. Something that would change this fragile tension forever. But my tongue failed me. I stayed silent, just pretending to listen to the voice on the phone, every nerve alert, every muscle taut. When I finally hung up, the room felt smaller, heavier. She hadn't moved. She just looked at me, her expression unreadable, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. And in that quiet, electric space, I realized I was already past the point of return in my mind, even if my hands hadn't crossed the line yet. She leaned back slightly, letting her gaze linger, and said casually, "I suppose you could stay a bit longer. If you want." And I did. More than I should. I didn't move yet. I just watched her, and the air between us felt charged, like something had shifted irrevocably. Something unspoken had moved closer, closer than either of us could admit. The room felt smaller than ever. Every paper on the desk, every chair, every hum of the fluorescent light seemed louder, more insistent. I was rearranging files, but I wasn't really looking at them. I was watching her, the way she leaned against the desk, fingers resting lightly on its edge, shoulders slightly slumped in exhaustion yet still impossibly poised. "I shouldn't be asking this," she said, voice low, hesitant, almost breaking. Her eyes caught mine and held them, daring me to respond, to acknowledge what we both felt but refused to name. I froze. My chest tightened, throat dry. Asking what? I managed, though the words sounded hollow. I knew exactly what she meant, and the tension in the air practically screamed it back at me. She sighed, a soft, almost defeated sound, and stepped a fraction closer. If you stayed later, if you're still here, is it just work for you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't just about hours or invoices, it was about us, about the impossibility of what we were feeling but couldn't admit. I wanted to answer honestly, wanted to tell her I'd stay for any reason that involved her, even if it was just to watch her breathe in the quiet of the office. But the words lodged in my throat. I tried to smile instead, a weak, nervous twitch, and shifted the papers in my hands to hide how aware I was of her proximity. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. Her lips pressed together, a micro-gesture that made my stomach flip. "You don't have to lie," she said softly, almost a whisper. The honesty in her tone was raw, unguarded. For a second, it felt like the world had narrowed to this tiny office, to her, to the shared tension that neither of us dared to act on. I wanted to step back, wanted to tell myself this was forbidden territory, but something held me there. Held me in the heat of that unspoken confession. I could see it in her eyes too, the pull, the curiosity, the danger of leaning into something we weren't supposed to. My hands trembled slightly as I set the files down. She didn't move, she just watched me, a faint crease of uncertainty between her brows. The air between us crackled, every breath synchronized, every pulse a reminder that lines were about to blur. I started, voice low, uneven. And then I stopped. Words weren't enough. Nothing could capture the storm of wanting and guilt and curiosity swirling between us. She tilted her head, eyes searching mine, and for a heartbeat, everything was silent except the pounding of my heart. The kind of silence that threatens to speak for both of us. Finally, she exhaled, soft, deliberate, and asked the question that changed the rhythm of everything. "Do you want to stay with me?" I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. I just looked at her, caught in that impossible stare, trapped between desire and reason, between everything we weren't supposed to do and everything I couldn't stop imagining. And the silence stretched, thick, loaded, and unbroken, holding the possibility of everything. I was still caught in the weight of that loaded silence when her phone buzzed on the desk. She picked it up, swiping the screen without a glance at me, and froze. The subtle furrow of her brow, the way her lips parted slightly, something had changed in her expression. Wait, how do you know him? She whispered, voice tight, incredulous. She didn't look at me, she looked past me, as if the world had suddenly shifted. I followed her gaze and realized there was a small photograph tucked behind a stack of invoices, her husband, or ex, I couldn't tell, standing next to someone I vaguely recognized, my older brother, a face I hadn't seen in years. You know my brother? I asked, confused, trying to mask the rush of panic and guilt rising in my chest. Her jaw tightened. You never said. I didn't think it would matter, she said slowly, almost as if she were piecing together a puzzle she hadn't known existed. Her hands were trembling slightly now, clutching the phone as if it could anchor her to reality. I felt my stomach drop. This was one of those moments that could unravel everything, or explain so much. The tension, the unspoken chemistry, the cautious glances, maybe she had been cautious because of him, because of some past connection I didn't even know about. I didn't think, I started, but she held up a hand. No. Don't. Just tell me everything. Please. Her voice was firm but laced with something fragile, a vulnerability that made my chest ache. She wasn't angry, exactly, but she was unsteady, and the sight of her like that, conflicted, raw, was more disarming than any flirtation, any stolen glance. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. It's not what you think, I said quickly, though I wasn't entirely sure how to explain it. It was years ago. He just came into my life briefly. Nothing happened. I swear. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair, pacing the small space of the office like she was trying to contain the storm inside her. So all of this, the tension, the things you said, the way you looked at me, it wasn't because of him? Her eyes searched mine, demanding honesty. No, I said firmly, though my heart was hammering. It's you. Always you. Her lips parted, like she wanted to believe me but wasn't sure she could. The room went silent again, heavy with possibility, with the weight of a revelation neither of us had anticipated. She stepped closer, and I could feel the shift in the air, something fragile yet electrifying. The past had collided with the present, but in the collision, a new space opened. A space where boundaries could be reconsidered, where desires could be questioned, where choices had to be made quickly, before the moment slipped away. She looked at me, searching, trembling slightly, and whispered, then, stay. Just stay. For me. And in that instant, I realized that everything had changed, nothing would ever be the same between us again. I didn't move at first. The room felt smaller than ever, every shadow, every sound magnified, but her gaze held me there, steady, impossibly patient. It wasn't just desire anymore, it was something heavier, more fragile. Something that demanded honesty. I don't know if I should, I started, voice rough, hands fidgeting with the corner of a paper. I've crossed lines I shouldn't even have thought about. Her lips twitched into a faint, knowing smile. Maybe. But the lines aren't the problem. It's pretending they don't exist. She took a slow step closer, and suddenly every rational thought I had evaporated. I could feel the warmth of her, subtle, intoxicating, and I realized I didn't want to pull back, not now, not ever. I shouldn't feel like this, I admitted, almost a whisper, more to myself than to her. I shouldn't care this much. My eyes met hers, and for the first time, I let all of it, the tension, the longing, the guilt, spill out. Her hand reached for mine, brushing fingers lightly against mine, and I caught her wrist, not to stop her, but to anchor myself. She didn't pull away. You do care, she said softly. And I care too. I didn't think I could, but here we are. The weight of it hit me. Here we were, two people who shouldn't be tangled in each other's lives, and yet, impossibly, we were. And maybe that was exactly why it mattered. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, the tension in my shoulders easing just a fraction. "Then, what do we do?" I asked, voice trembling, because asking that question meant everything could change. She shrugged, almost imperceptibly, then reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, letting her fingers linger near my cheek. "We start here. Honestly. No pretending. No excuses. Just us for a while." I nodded, chest tight, heart hammering, and it felt like the first time I'd truly exhaled in months. Nothing was perfect. Nothing was neat. But it was ours. Real, messy, and raw. She stepped closer, so close I could feel her breath against my skin, and whispered, "I don't want this to be something we regret later. I just want it to be real, whatever that means." "I can do real," I said, quiet but firm. "If you'll let me." And then we stood there, fingers entwined, silent, letting the moment settle like dust in the sunlight. Not a declaration. Not a guarantee. Just acknowledgement. Recognition of the fragile, impossible thing that had grown between us. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel it fully, the longing, the relief, the dizzying mixture of fear and desire. We weren't perfect. We weren't supposed to be. But we were honest, and in that honesty, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself in years: hope. And as the office lights hummed quietly above us, I realized that the line we had feared the office felt different the next morning. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint creak of chairs, even the smell of stale coffee, it all felt sharper, somehow more intimate. And yet, it wasn't awkward. It was real. She was there before me, leaning against the edge of the desk, sipping her coffee with that same quiet confidence, but now there was a softness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. When she looked at me, it wasn't with suspicion or restraint, but with recognition. Recognition of what had happened between us and, somehow, what was possible going forward. We moved through the day carefully, almost cautiously, letting the world continue around us as we adjusted to this new rhythm. Nothing had changed about the office, the paperwork, or the deadlines. Everything had changed about us. The tension that had once threatened to consume us had settled into a quiet, steady presence. A promise unspoken but deeply understood. I noticed her laugh linger longer now, noticed the way she'd brush a stray lock of hair behind her ear, how her eyes found mine when she thought I wasn't looking. And I realized I was watching her, not in the frantic, dangerous way of before, but with attention, with care. With a desire to understand her, to respect her, and to be present with her. And she noticed me, too. The small things, the micro-gestures, the silent acknowledgement of shared space and moments. We didn't need to talk about it all. The air between us carried enough meaning. By the end of the day, we were the last ones in the office. I handed her a file, and she accepted it with that same faint smile that had haunted my thoughts the first night. "Thank you," she said softly, eyes meeting mine. "For staying. For being honest." I wanted to say more, to spill every thought I'd had, every fear, every longing. But instead, I simply nodded and let my fingers brush hers for just a second longer than necessary. She didn't pull away. That small, shared moment spoke louder than any confession could. Walking home later, I thought about what had changed. I had learned that desire could coexist with respect, that mistakes didn't always mean the end, and that honesty, messy, imperfect honesty, was more powerful than any precaution. I realized I hadn't just gained a connection, I had gained clarity, patience, and the courage to let someone in without hiding behind excuses. And as the city lights blurred past, I kept replaying her voice, her laugh, her gaze. A tension that had once terrified me had become something I cherished. Something that reminded me that the most meaningful connections are rarely neat or easy, they are human, flawed, and unforgettable. So here we are, closing one chapter and leaving the rest unwritten. Life will continue, with its messiness and unpredictability, but I know one thing for certain: some connections leave marks that can't be erased. They linger, quietly, beautifully, and change everything. Did you enjoy this story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Slow burn romance, emotional tension, or something entirely unexpected? Share your thoughts below, I'd love to know.